Hello my friends and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be my October wrap-up. Now, if you remember, September was not a good month for me in terms of reading. However, October was much better. I read 21 books and I had 2 5-star reads, which I am so thankful for because I was having bad luck with my book selections and I was in desperate need of a 5-star read to pick me up. So October did come through for me and my reading month wasn't too bad. Some of these books I did include in vlogs that I did in the month of October, so some of these books I'm not going to go into too much depth on, so I'll have those vlogs linked down in the description box in case you want to see and hear more of my full thoughts and feelings when I was reading them. But without further ado, let's get into the books that I read in the month of October. So the first book I actually read, it was literally the first book I read, I almost forgot about. I just realized when I sat down to film this that I read this and I almost didn't include it. But the first book I read for October was Big Bad by Chandler Baker. This is part of the creature feature collection that Amazon did. It's only 59 pages, so I'm actually not going to go into too much detail about what this story is. I really don't remember reading this. I'm pretty sure I just saw everyone else reading the creature feature collection and I had some time to kill before I started like reading for my vlogs, so I was like, oh, I'll just pick one up. This is the one I picked. I remember thinking it was okay. They're really short. Like I said, it's only 59 pages, so I think my problem was that the story was fine. It's not necessarily something that like really pulled me or was like super interesting to me, but it was easy enough. I read it in like, I don't know, an hour. But I think it was just kind of rushed and I wanted more from the story, so I think I'm gonna give it a 3-star. Next up, let's talk about Hold Back the Tide by Melinda Salisbury. This is a YA horror book and I can't really give you too much of a plot synopsis because if I do, it'll be spoilery. So this is about the main character, Alva, who is 16 and she lives with her father and she believes that her father killed her mother. And that's kind of the story. It's more so the story in the beginning of the book, and then the story kind of changes and it becomes something entirely different, which I did not see coming. This book surprised me. I had no real idea what it was going to be about when I picked it up, but I was pleasantly surprised and I really enjoyed it. There is a little bit of romance in this book as well, which I enjoyed. And the ending is super gut-wrenching, super sad, super bittersweet. It's a really emotional ending. And yeah, I was really surprised by this book. I again had no real idea what it was going into it, but it was actually really good. I was surprised that it was YA because I didn't know that, but it didn't feel too YA. I feel like the biggest YA part about this book is the main character, Alva, who is 16. She acts very YA, which I guess makes sense, but overall I think the story was actually really good. It was a very interesting read. I'm going to give this one 4 stars. Next up is Bloodline by Jess Lurie. I heard that it was compared a lot to Rosemary's Baby and I do agree, but I wasn't the biggest fan of this book. In this story, we are following the main character Joan, who is pregnant, and her boyfriend Deck move to his hometown in Minnesota. It's called Lilydale and it's very picturesque and perfect. But when they arrive there, Joan starts feeling a little suffocated by the people, by Deck's family. She feels like she's being watched. She just feels like something's not quite right. And this book was actually inspired by a true story. Now, I do agree with the people saying it has Rosemary's Baby vibes, but I didn't love this. It it's very, very predictable. It kind of has a Stepford Wives feel to it as well, which again I liked because I like Rosemary's Baby and I like the Stepford Wives kind of vibe. So I feel like it had the makings to be really good, but it's a very predictable story. It's something that I've seen a lot. It's not anything like new or different, and it just took me a while to get into the story. Even though the book is really a fast read, it doesn't take that long to like get through it, even though it kind of looks a little chunky. It's only a little over 300 pages and the chapters are really, really short. I think I was just expecting something more and it didn't really give me that. It's also labeled like a thriller horror, and I personally wouldn't call it a thriller or a horror. I think it feels more like a mystery because there's not really that many twists or turns to this plot. It feels very straightforward. It has a little mystery surrounding it, but I feel like if you've read a story like this, you'll probably know the direction it's gonna take. So I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. And then at the end of the month, I did a readathon with my patrons, and these are the 4 books that I ended up reading during that readathon. First up is Miruko Chan Volume 1. I was really excited about this series. I think I have like 5 volumes of this series in my possession. Basically, this story is about the main character, and she can see like ghosts and monsters, and she just sees them in her day-to-day life. I was expecting more from this, honestly. I know a lot of people really like this story, but it was okay. The art is beautiful. I really, really, really like the art. The art is really, really good. The story itself is very lackluster. It feels like it's a slice of life, which is fine. I like and I enjoy slice of life manga, but I just feel like there's not really any substance to this plot. I'm hoping that in the later volumes there are going to be more layers to the plot. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like there's much going on, and it just feels like it's going to become very repetitive. Also, the first half of this volume is very heavy on fan service, which I'm not a big fan of in manga or anime. I don't really like seeing fan service. The second half did get better, but I'm just hoping that the rest of the series doesn't rely too much on fan service, because I probably will stop reading if it does continue. But I'll probably give this a 3.5 as of right now. Then I ended up reading Garlic and the Vampire by Brie Paulson. I actually forgot about this for a second, so I actually had 3 5 stars this month because this was 100% a 5-star. It was so freaking cute. Everyone's been talking about this graphic novel, and I knew I was gonna love it, but it was just so precious. The art is really beautiful, and it's just a really like heartwarming, like cute story. I just had a lot of fun with it. Basically, it's about the main character, Garlic, and her friends notice that there is someone living in this castle, and they think that it could be a vampire, so they end up sending Garlic to go see if the vampire is nice or not, and that's pretty much the plot of this one. And it was just so cute. I had so much fun. I literally finished it in like no time. It was such a quick read, but it was perfect for this time of year, and it was just so cute. And yeah, 5 stars, easy 5 stars. I of course then followed that up with Garlic and the Witch by Brie Paulson, and again, I really like this one too. I definitely think Garlic and the Vampire is just like a little bit better. I personally didn't love this one as much. The art is still really good. I still thought the story was really cute and fun and sweet. I just think Garlic and the Vampire had like a little edge to it that made it a 5-star. This is more of like a 4.5 star, but still really cute, and I really hope this author comes out with more of these because I would read a ton of them, so I'm hopeful that maybe in the future we'll get more. I don't know. And then the last book I read for the readathon was The Stranger Upstairs by Lisa M. Matlin. I hated this. I really, really, really hated this book. Let me just tell you what it's about. Basically, this is about the main character, Sarah, who writes self-help books, and she has like a blog and whatever. Her and her husband buy this house that has a pretty messed up past, and they decide to renovate it, and she's going to like make that part of her blog, talking about like the renovations on the house, and basically things just keep going wrong and it just gets like worse and worse. Her and her husband's marriage is falling apart as well, so it's just like not a good situation, and it's amplified and made worse by like all the problems they encounter while trying to renovate, and just like the neighborhood not really liking them or being happy that they bought the house. And then of course like mysterious creepy things start happening. Honestly, this was so disappointing. The main character made me want to DNF the book like within 30 pages. I was really wanting to DNF this like the minute I started it because she was so annoying. I could not stand her. I'm just not a super big fan of thrillers that try to take the like haunted house approach to things either. And the twist in this one was just so ridiculous. I wish I had DNF'd it. I did not think it was like clever or fun or anything. Like, it honestly made me kind of roll my eyes, and I was like, I just wasted my whole time reading this book to get this ending. So yeah, really disappointed by this one, but I should have listened to the reviews because everyone was talking about how bad this one was, and I thought that everyone was being dramatic. Well, they were not. I hated it. So I'm giving this 2 stars. Next up is The September House by Carissa Orlando. This was my Patreon book club pick for October, and everyone had been raving about this book. I'd been seeing it get 5 stars here and here and here. Like, everyone's just been talking about this book, so I really wanted to know what all the hype was about. I don't really want to talk about this book too much because I feel like if I go into too much detail about the plot, it could give something away. So just know this is a haunted house story. It's a little bit different than your typical haunted house story, but I did enjoy this book. I was very wary. I would say about halfway through, I was getting a little concerned because the first half of this book, I was here for it. I was like, this is interesting. This I like. This, yes, I want to know what's going on. The middle part of this book, I was a little hesitant. I was getting a little wary. I was a little nervous because it was taking a direction that I personally don't like in stories like this. So I was getting really worried. I was like, okay, I don't get what all the hype is about. I don't get what everyone's talking about. The ending saved this book for me. It is a little rushed. It is a little rushed. I think the ending should have been kind of spread out a little bit better just because the middle is so repetitive that when the ending happens, it feels so fast and quick and just like, whoa, like I'm getting whiplash. So I wish that had happened, but the ending has one of my favorite tropes in it. I love how the ending turned out. So the ending really saved this book for me. I'm not sure what I want to give it. I think I might give it like a 4, maybe a 4.5, but I am leaning more towards a 4 for this one. But it is like a cozy horror book, which I really enjoyed, and it does have some like good like comedy, and I liked that. So overall, very interesting. Not at all what I expected, but I did enjoy it. Next up is Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. This was Jan's book club, the Full Moon Book Club's pick for October. I was a co-host. I will have the live discussion where we talked about this book down in the description if you want to see our discussion and what we talked about and our feelings and all that kind of stuff. I love Rachel Harrison. I love Rachel Harrison a lot, and this book was very surprising. It's not what I expected. I didn't really know what I was getting into with this book. What I got was not what I was expecting. This is about the main character, Vesper, and when she was 18, she left home. She grew up in a religious community, and when she left, she just never looked back. She ends up finding a wedding invitation to her cousin's wedding, and her cousin were very close, so she ends up deciding to go back home for the wedding and kind of face everything that she left behind. So this is a very clever story. Rachel Harrison, she did a lot in this book, and it's a very interesting discussion around religion. It's very fun how she chose to go about the way she talked about religion. I thought it was very interesting and very clever, and I really enjoyed it. It kind of made me laugh when I figured out what she was doing, but I think it was a very smart choice and I think that it worked really well, and I think it made the messaging about religion very obvious, but not in the way I think people would expect it to be. It was a very fun book. It felt a little bit more comedic than her typical books that I've read. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of like comedic horror, but I do think in this instance it did work. It felt a lot like a Grady Hendrix book, which I love Grady Hendrix, so I did like that. I do wish the ending hadn't been so rushed. It felt a little too sudden and a little chaotic. I wish that it had been spread out a little bit more. The ending just kind of was a little bit abrupt for me. I was expecting a little bit more, I think. But I did really enjoy this book, and I think a lot of people will really like it, especially if you like Rachel Harrison. I don't think it's like my new favorite from her personally. I still think Cackle is much better. So I'm stuck between a 4 and a 4.5 for this one. I'm not quite sure where I want to put it, but it feels somewhere between a 4 and a 4.5. Alright, next up for my Patreon, I did a Darcy Coates reading vlog. So I ended up reading 4 Darcy Coates books in October, which was wonderful and just the perfect way to celebrate October in my opinion. First up, I read Quarter to Midnight, which is a short story collection with 15 short stories. I really enjoyed this. However, I had read like 80 to 90% of these stories already. A lot of these short stories are featured in some of Darcy's like shorter novels. Like in the back, they're like little extras. So I had actually read a lot of these, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I still had a lot of fun rereading them, but I think it did kind of hinder my experience because I had already read them before. So while they were still entertaining, only a few were like new and different for me. I'm still gonna give this 4 stars because I still think the stories are really good, and it was an easy, quick read and I liked it. I just wish I hadn't already read the majority of them. Next up was Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. This one I had a very interesting reading experience with, but this is a wintry, isolated thriller, and it's about the main character, Krista, who is with a tour group, and they're going into the Rocky Mountains, but they end up getting hit with a major snowstorm, and they had to take shelter in this cabin. And when they wake up the next morning from sleeping, they find their tour guide's head removed from his body and stuck on a tree for them to find. This story is so interesting because the very beginning I was not expecting. It kind of just really throws you into the story, and it doesn't really give you time to kind of acclimate. I was very surprised because at least with most thrillers, I feel like the beginning kind of gives you some background information, even if it's just a little bit. This one was very quick and kind of just like went straight into it, which I liked, honestly. I didn't dislike it. I liked it a lot. The funny thing about this is I could not predict anything in this book. And once I finished it, I was very mad at myself because I really should have seen a lot of the stuff from this book coming. It's really not super surprising twists or turns, but there's something about Darcy's writing where I just get sucked in so easily, and she really can just like wipe my mind clean where I can't think of anything else but what's in front of me. So it was really funny because when I finished it, I was so mad at myself. I was like, oh, I got tricked. I got duped. I should have known what the twist was. But I actually didn't predict anything in this story, which was a nice, refreshing thing for me because I feel like with most thrillers, I do predict a lot of the twists. So it was a really enjoyable reading experience for me. It's very formulaic. It's not anything super mind-blowing in my opinion, but I think the tropes and the formula that Darcy chose to follow worked really well, and it was a really fun story, and it was a great isolated snowy thriller, which that's like my favorite type of thriller. So overall, I really like this one. I don't know how everyone else is gonna feel about it, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm giving this 4.5 stars. Next up was Small Horrors. This is another short story collection. This has 50 short stories in it, so you can probably tell they are really short stories. They're basically bite-sized pieces of horror. I personally liked this more than Quarter to Midnight. I think it's because these were all new to me, and I had a lot of fun with them. I think that a lot of these stories would be amazing novels. I really would love Darcy to come back to some of these and make an actual just full story out of them. I think some of these short stories were so incredibly good that they would just be the perfect plot for a horror book. So my fingers are crossed that she might actually do that. Hopefully, maybe, someday. I can always hope. I did have a lot of fun with this. I know this is probably not going to be everyone's cup of tea because they're super short, and I know a lot of people have issues with like short stories like that, but for me, it worked really well. I am going to give this one 4.5, I think. Next up is Where He Can't Find You by Darcy Coates. This is coming out November 7th. The time that I'm filming this right now, this is not currently out, but by the time that I post this video, I think this will already be out. I got an arc of this sent to me from Sourcebooks Fire, which I was incredibly excited about. This is a YA horror, and I absolutely loved this book. I have so many feelings about it. This is about the main character, Abby, and she lives in this town called Doubtful. This town has a problem with missing people. It is not uncommon for people to go missing. They do return, however, their body has been rearranged and restitched together. So they are not alive, and their body parts were removed and then sewn back together with this red thread, and it is the work of someone they call the Stitcher. And one day Abby's sister ends up going missing, and her friends have to go find her sister because they know that the police are probably not going to be worried since this is a very common occurrence. I loved this. I love this so much. I think that YA horror is so hard to do sometimes because authors just don't want to push the envelope. They are scared to overstep bounds, I think, because they get worried over, you know, certain material and certain graphic nature. But to me, this is what I would expect and want from a YA horror. I feel like the body horror was so well done. It's a very gruesome, very messed up story, and I feel like Darcy really did go there. I feel like she did push it to a place where I was very happy to see it go. And there is a little bit of romance, a little hint, a little tiny hint of romance. It's really not anything major to the story. It's just kind of like a little sprinkle of romance, which, you know, I love. But this is a genuinely creepy book. I scared myself while reading it, which is kind of embarrassing because I don't get scared that easy. But this actually did freak me out. I was reading it at night and then I had to like go to the bathroom, and when I left my room it was really dark, and yeah, I was afraid that something was gonna like kill me. So definitely creeped me out. Definitely really, really well done. I'm just so happy this book is what it is. It's not at all what I expected, but also kind of what I expected. I don't know. It was just really, really, really fun, and it kind of gave me It vibes. So Stephen King, It, if you're a fan of that, I feel like the ending kind of has a similar vibe to that, which I was also really excited about. But this book, I absolutely loved it. And definitely probably a new favorite from Darcy. Maybe. I don't know. I can't say. I don't know how many favorites I have. I have a ton, but I really, really, really liked it. I'm giving this 5 stars. These next 4 are the books I read for the Reading Your Scariest Book Recommendations reading vlog, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about these ones, so if you want to see my full thoughts, the vlog will be linked down below. But first up was The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. This is a gothic horror novel about the main character who is now a widow, and she ends up moving into her deceased husband's estate. She doesn't have that many people around her, but her husband's cousin is now living with her and they are in mourning together. The estate is in really bad shape, but they also find these wooden painted figures. They are called Silent Companions, and some creepy things start to happen. Gothic horror is very hit or miss for me. It really just depends. Sometimes it really works out, sometimes it doesn't. This is a case where it really didn't work for me. The first half of this book is incredibly slow and honestly kind of boring. It took a lot for me to get interested in it. I didn't know why I should care. I don't know, it just felt like nothing was really going on. The second half is much more entertaining. However, I absolutely hated the ending to this book. It felt just so irritating to me that I just didn't have a great time reading this book. So for those reasons, I will probably be giving it a 3 star. Then we have The Third Parent by Elias Withrow. This was a Reddit no sleep story, which I actually did read on Reddit a few years ago. I never finished it, so I was actually very interested to continue reading it in book form. But this is about this family, a husband, a wife, a son, and a daughter, who get a knock on their door one evening, and when they open it, it is this very strange, bizarre, eerie looking man named Tommy Taffy. He basically barges in and holds the family captive, and if they do not do what he tells them to, or if they break his rules, there are severe consequences. So when I read this on Reddit, I wasn't a big fan of it. I didn't really care about this story. It wasn't something that was interesting to me. So when I started reading this, I was like, this feels familiar. What is this? And I realized I had read this on Reddit no sleep. I decided to keep reading and give it a chance because I knew there was going to be some kind of difference since this was taken from a Reddit no sleep forum to a full-length novel. I think the idea is very interesting. I think it's very unique, but it's honestly just so ridiculous and over the top and comical that I couldn't really take it serious. Tommy Taffy isn't very good at being a villain, in my opinion. I mean, his name is Tommy Taffy. It was just kind of like, again, ridiculous. He does some very horrific things. There were a couple instances where I was like, whoa, this is a lot. It just didn't really work for me. The second half of the book takes a predictable direction that I wasn't shocked by, and the explanation for Tommy Taffy and everything going on was just lame. I rather had been left in the dark and not had an explanation than had the explanation that was given to me. I like the idea. I think it's unique, but the writing, Tommy Taffy, the comical nature of it all just didn't really work for me. I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. Next up we have Last Days by Adam Neville. This is about the main character Kyle, who is doing a documentary on a cult known as the Temple of the Last Days. And he ends up traveling to Arizona, London, France. He's basically going to all these places, interviewing people and talking to them, and the more he uncovers about this cult, the creepier it becomes and weird things start happening. This book was too long. It was just way too long. It was really just way too long. It got really repetitive. Nothing was happening, but things were happening. And the ending, I don't know. It was just, again, predictable. I didn't really care. I was just kind of over it by that point because the ending took forever to actually end. Like, at 80%, I was like, why is this still happening? Like, where is the ending? Where is the end in sight? I can't see it. It was just a lot. It was just really slow. I really liked the aspect of the cult. I found it very interesting, and I liked the detail that Adam Neville went into, but I just think that the book should have been like cut in half, honestly. It was just too much information, not a lot happening, and just too slow. There were some really good creepy moments, but I think this book would be better as a movie, honestly, which I hate saying because this does have like a found footage vibe, but I just think it would work better as a movie. I'm gonna give this 3.5 stars. And lastly, for that vlog is Fantastic Land by Mike Bukoven. I still don't know how to pronounce this author's name, so sorry. But this is like a Lord of the Flies battle royale type of story. It's about this theme park called Fantastic Land that gets hit by a hurricane, and the employees in the amusement park get stuck there, and things just get really out of hand, and it becomes a wild situation. I really liked this book. I found it really interesting. I love battle royale, Lord of the Flies types of books. I actually learned that in October that it just really works for me. I'm very into it for whatever reason. It's just a trope I really enjoy. My biggest issue with this story is the way it's written. It's a very unique way to write a story like this. It's told in interviews, so every chapter is a new interview, but it's kind of bizarre because it's not like someone asks a question and then the person answers. It's just all the person answering, but you can kind of tell where the questions are being asked. They're just omitted. So it's meant to give you a sense of like storytelling, but it just feels very awkward, I guess. I don't know. It just kind of threw me off. Also, the way it's told is in present day, but the situation happened in the past. I felt like the sense of danger or worry or nervousness wasn't really as amplified as it could have been because I knew there was no way to change the outcome. It had already happened, so my sense of worry was lessened by that. Whereas in like the Hunger Games or Battle Royale, you're in the middle of the situation with the characters, so it feels a little bit more dangerous. So I feel like that did kind of hinder my reading experience, but I really liked the story overall. I found it really interesting, and again, I'm just a big fan of this kind of story, I guess. So I am going to give this 4 stars. And the last 4 books for this wrap up were the 4 books I read for the reading vlog of reading the internet's scariest book recommendations. So first up is The Auctioneer by Joan Samson. I hated this book. I really didn't like it. This is a paperbacks from hell. It's about the Moore family that live in a town called Harlow, New Hampshire. And basically this new guy comes to town. His name's Pearly. He's an auctioneer, and he is asking people for donations to auction off. You know, the Moore family give them some stuff for auctioning, but then it becomes a thing of these people keep coming back for more and more and more donations to auction. And no one can say no. They just have to give them stuff, and people start getting into mysterious accidents. It becomes a whole thing. This was really boring. I didn't feel really anything towards the characters. I didn't really care about them. I didn't care for them. I thought the situation was ridiculous and over the top. It didn't feel like scary or worrisome. I just felt like it was kind of again, ridiculous. I just didn't see this happening in real life. It didn't feel realistic. And the ending also was kind of boring and bland and predictable. I didn't expect anything less from the ending. If you want to read a similar kind of story, I think Needful Things by Stephen King is much better. This is definitely a similar story, but I just think Needful Things does it much better. This just was like a waste of my time, honestly. I think a lot of people will love it, and obviously people do love it, but yeah, it was not for me at all. It was a very boring, slow, quiet, I guess, horror book, but honestly it didn't really feel like a horror book. I am giving this 2 stars. Next up we have The House Next Door by Anne Rivers Siddons. This is a haunted house story. This is about the main characters, Colquitt and Walter. They are husband and wife, and they have a very wonderful life. They love their neighborhood. They have just a great relationship. They're having a great time, but construction begins on the lot next to them, and a house begins to be built, and some mysterious things start happening once the house is built, and it turns out that this house may be haunted. This was a fun read. I actually really did enjoy it. I was expecting more of a haunted house story, and it is kind of a haunted house story, but it feels a little bit more like a drama, like neighborhood drama, relationship drama. It just feels like kind of dramatic and over the top. It feels kind of like you're watching a soap or like something like that. It's very fun. It's entertaining, and I did enjoy it. It's just not quite what I expected from a haunted house story. I also love that the main characters are living next to the haunted house and not living in the haunted house like in typical haunted house stories. So I did think it was fun. I just think you should probably alter your expectations if you're going into it. I wouldn't expect something like super scary or creepy. It's just more like a little bit like fun and drama filled. There are a little bit of creepy moments, but nothing major. It was still entertaining. I still had fun. I liked the ending. I thought the ending was kind of like funny. So overall, I am giving this one a 4-star. Next up is probably the most disappointing book I read in October, and that is Ring by Koji Suzuki. I am a big fan of the movies, so I was excited to read the book that inspired the movies. If you don't know what this story is about, it's about the main character who is a journalist, and he starts researching these mysterious deaths that he thinks are connected, and it leads him to a videotape, and he watches the videotape, and he learns that he has 7 days to live, and he basically goes on a hunt to try and find a way to break this 7-day curse and not die. Wow, this was disappointing. I wasn't really sure how different this was going to be from the movies. The biggest difference, just off the plot synopsis, is the main character is a man, and in the movies that I've seen, both the Japanese and American versions, the main character is a woman, and I completely understand why they made that change, because he's a terrible person. He is just a misogynist, and he's not a nice guy. I think they did the correct choice in making the main character a woman in the movies. It was just smarter, honestly. But the big difference is the background information on Sadako, and personally, her story in the book is just very bizarre. I don't know why they went into the direction they did with the book. It was just disappointing, honestly. There's a lot of disappointing things in this book, but Sadako's backstory is one of them. The misogyny and sexism is another. The main character has a best friend who is just terrible and awful to women, and I guess he was supposed to be redeemed at the end of the book, but I didn't get that. Honestly, if you want to know the story of Ring, if you've never seen it and you want to get involved in that story, just watch the movies. Any of the movies, honestly. I wouldn't recommend the book. I think the book was just, honestly, kind of terrible. It wasn't that good. It was fast to read, but it wasn't very good. I think they took everything that was good about this story and made it scarier and 100 times better in the movies. Definitely don't read this, just watch the movies. I'm giving this 2.5 stars. And And the last book that I read in that vlog and for this month was Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi. I absolutely loved this. Everyone has been raving about this book, saying it's like one of the scariest books they've ever read. So that is why I ended up buying it, because I wanted to know what everyone was talking about. This is about the main character, Peter. He is at this orphanage called St. Vincent's for boys. It's run by these priests. And one night they get a knock on the orphanage's doors, and it's a group of men asking for the priest's help. They have an injured man who needs assistance and they invite him in, but when they do try to help him, they realize that not only is he wounded, but he has strange occult symbols on his body, and unfortunately they are not able to save this man, so he does end up dying. And when he does die, some strange things begin happening around the orphanage. Some of the boys start acting a little bit odd. I didn't have high hopes for this, mostly because people were talking about how scary it was. Personally, I didn't find it that scary, but I really loved this story. I loved Peter. I thought he was a great character. I actually really enjoyed the setting of the orphanage, which I wasn't expecting myself to enjoy. This is supposed to be like Lord of the Flies meets Children of the Corn, and I just got done talking about Fantastic Land and how much I love Lord of the Flies, Battle Royale, Hunger Games type plots. So again, really worked for me in this book too. It was very intense, very sad. This is a very sad book. The ending hurt my heart. I almost didn't rate this 5 stars because the ending was so gut-wrenching, but I think that it worked in a way that I can overlook how sad I was by it. I did cry a few times during this book, which I know I'm a baby, so it makes sense, but this was just a really well done story. That's why I'm giving it 5 stars. It was just so good. The beginning was a little slow, a little slow, and I do wish the ending had been spaced out a little bit more. It felt like a lot happened at the very end, which is a problem with a lot of books from October apparently, but I can overlook those 2 things and give this 5 stars still because it was so good. I really enjoyed it a lot. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it, but obviously people are enjoying it. I don't know if I would say it's the scariest book I ever read, but it is a really well done horror book. I think this would make an excellent movie too. It's some of my favorite tropes in horror, so I think it was just really good, and I had a lot of fun with this one. Alright my friends, that is it for October. Those are the 21 books I read. I feel like it was a pretty good reading month for me. I had some lows, but some highs. I actually got some 5 stars, which was awesome. I'm very happy about that. Hopefully, fingers crossed, November is as good as October was for me, and it gives me some more 5 stars before the year is over. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Let me know. Let me know what you read in October, what your least favorite book of the month was. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you agree, disagree, if any of them are on your TBR. I would love to know. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I also have a Patreon linked down in the description box. We can become friends, talk about books, horrifying books, thrilling books, romance books, manga, all that good fun stuff. And with that being said, I hope you are having a great day, night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!